Part 1. The Summons. The autumn rain hammered against the carriage windows like accusatory fists as Viscount Lucian Hawthorne's conveyance lurched toward Hawthorne Hall. His jaw clenched so fiercely his teeth ached. The summons had arrived 3 days prior, Uncle Reginald's spidery handwriting trembling across parchment. "Come at once. The matter is urgent and concerns your future." Lucian's future. As if you possessed one worth discussing. He was 32 years old, a man hollowed out by betrayal, his fortune nearly decimated by his father's reckless investments and his own youthful excess. The earldom had crumbled like stale bread. His engagement to Lady Victoria Langford, that glittering, serpentine creature, had shattered 5 years ago when she'd abandoned him for a marquis with deeper pockets. The scandal had nearly finished what poverty had started. Now he existed in a state of permanent numbness, moving through London's drawing rooms like a ghost, accepting invitations only to disappoint hostesses with his caustic wit and refusal to flirt. He'd sworn never to marry, never to surrender his heart to another woman's ambitions, never to be made a fool of again. The carriage wheels crunched against gravel as Hawthorne Hall materialized through the mist. Even through the rain, Lucian could see the decay, cracked stonework, shutters hanging like broken wings, gardens surrendered to wild growth. His chest tightened. This was all that remained of his family's legacy. Uncle Reginald waited in the library, a room that had once been Lucian's sanctuary. Now it was chaos. Books scattered across every surface, papers yellowing in precarious stacks, the air thick with dust and the metallic scent of illness. His uncle sat by the dying fire, a skeletal figure wrapped in blankets despite the autumn warmth. "Cancer," the physician had whispered. "Weeks, perhaps a month." "Lucian," Reginald's voice cracked like old leather. "You came." "Of course I came." Lucian knelt beside the chair, taking his uncle's papery hand. Beneath the fragile skin, he felt the tremor of approaching death. "What's happened? Are you in pain? Shall I summon—" "Sit." Reginald gestured to the adjacent chair with surprising authority. "I haven't much time, and I won't waste it on pleasantries. You're drowning, nephew. I've watched you for 5 years, sinking deeper into that cesspool of bitterness. Victoria broke you, and you've decided the world should suffer for it." Heat flared in Lucian's chest. "With respect, uncle." "No respect. Listen." Reginald's eyes, still sharp despite his failing body, fixed on Lucian with the intensity of a man who'd made peace with death and therefore feared nothing. "I've made a decision. One that will either save you or damn you further. I don't particularly care which, as I'll be dead either way." Lucian's stomach dropped. "What decision?" "I've hidden a trust fund, £50,000, and the deed to Thornfield Estate in Yorkshire. Productive land, good tenants, enough to rebuild our name if managed wisely. It's yours, Lucian. All of it. On one condition." "Name it." "You marry within 7 days, to a woman of my choosing." The words hung in the smoke-hazed air like a curse. Lucian shot to his feet, his chair clattering backward. "Absolutely not. Uncle, I understand you're unwell, but this is madness. I will not be bartered like livestock at market." "Then you'll have nothing." Reginald's voice remained eerily calm. "The funds will go to the Crown. Thornfield will be seized for taxes, and you'll continue your slow dissolution into irrelevance. Your choice, nephew." "This is blackmail." "This is love." Reginald's eyes glistened. "I'm dying, Lucian. I won't leave this world knowing I've abandoned you to your own self-destruction. You need someone strong enough to survive you." "I don't need anyone." Precisely the problem. Part 2. The Bride. Clara Evergreen was arranging leather-bound volumes on the highest shelf of her modest bookshop when the carriage arrived in the village square. She didn't notice it at first. She was too absorbed in the delicate task of organizing Lord Reginald's collection, which he'd asked her to catalogue before his death. The old man had been her salvation. When her father's business had collapsed 3 years ago, when creditors had circled like wolves and her mother had wept herself into an early grave. It was Lord Reginald who'd offered her employment. Not as a servant, he'd been too kind for that, but as his librarian, his reader, his companion during the long afternoons when his body had begun its betrayal. She'd read to him from poetry and philosophy. She'd listened to his stories of a younger, wilder Lucian, before the betrayal, before the bitterness had calcified into his bones. She'd organized his chaos and, in doing so, had found purpose. Now, at 24, she was a woman of contradictions, educated but poor, strong-willed but resigned to a life of quiet service, intelligent enough to understand that love was a luxury she could never afford. "Miss Evergreen?" She turned to find Lord Reginald's solicitor, Mr. Pemberton, standing in her shop doorway, his expression grave. Her heart seized. "He's gone?" "Not yet, but he's asked me to deliver a message. He wishes you to come to Hawthorne Hall this evening. There's a matter of some importance." The hall loomed against the darkening sky like a sleeping giant. Clara's hands trembled as she climbed from the hired carriage. She'd been here before, of course, many times, but never summoned in this formal manner. Never with this sense of impending catastrophe. Lord Reginald received her in his chamber. He looked smaller than she remembered, as though death was already claiming him piece by piece. "Clara," he reached for her hand. "Thank you for coming. I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen without interruption." She nodded, though dread pooled in her stomach. "I'm dying. The physicians give me weeks. Before I go, I want to ensure my nephew doesn't follow me into the grave, which is precisely what he's doing, though he's too stubborn to admit it." Reginald paused, gathering breath. "I've made a will with a condition. Lucian inherits a substantial sum and an estate, but only if he marries within 7 days." Clara's soul fractured like glass under the weight of his next words. "I've chosen you." The room tilted. "I beg your pardon?" "You're the only woman I've ever met who sees Lucian clearly, not the title, not the money, but the man beneath. You've shown him kindness when he deserved none. You've proven your strength and your character. You're his redemption, Clara, whether he knows it or not." "Lord Reginald, this is impossible. He'll never—" "He'll rage. He'll refuse. He'll be absolutely insufferable." Reginald smiled, and it was the smile of a man who'd already won. "But he'll come to Hawthorne Hall, and you'll both spend 7 days in proximity. You'll share meals. You'll work together to restore the library. And if, at the end of that week, you've found no connection, my wish dies with me, and you're free." "And if we do?" The question escaped before she could stop it. "Then you marry him, and you save his life." Clara's hands shook. "He'll despise me." "Undoubtedly, at first." Reginald squeezed her fingers. "But you're braver than you know, my dear. And he's more capable of love than he believes. I'm betting my final act on that truth." Part 3. Collision. Lucian was in the library, hurling books into a crate with the fury of a man possessed when Clara entered. He looked up, and his expression cycled through confusion, recognition, and then a rage so pure it seemed to ignite the very air between them. "You!" His voice was a whip crack. "What are you doing here?" Clara's chin lifted, though her heart hammered against her ribs like a caged bird. "Your uncle has asked me to—" "I know precisely what my uncle has asked you to do." Lucian advanced on her, his eyes blazing. "He's asked you to marry me, a shop girl, a woman of no family, no fortune, no standing whatsoever. This is his final cruelty, isn't it? His last attempt to control me from beyond the grave." The words struck like physical blows. Clara had known this would be his reaction, had prepared herself for it, and yet the pain was exquisite in its intensity. "I didn't ask for this," she said quietly. "I came because your uncle asked it of me. But I won't force myself on you, my lord. I'll leave now, and you need never see me again." She turned toward the door. "Wait!" The single word stopped her. When she turned back, Lucian's expression had shifted. The rage was still there, but beneath it, something else. Something that looked almost like desperation. "He's dying," Lucian said flatly, "and he's using his death as a weapon. If I refuse, I lose everything. If I accept, I'm bound to a woman I barely know. Either way, I'm trapped." "Yes," Clara said simply. "You are." Something flickered across his face, perhaps respect for her honesty. "He's insisted on a week. 7 days of cohabitation, as though proximity could somehow forge a connection between two people who have no reason to care for each other." "Then we'll endure it," Clara said, "for his sake." "For his sake," Lucian repeated bitterly. "Not for love, not for any noble reason, simply because we're both too weak to refuse a dying man." The accusation stung because it was true. Clara felt her eyes burn with unshed tears, but she refused to let them fall. "I'll stay in the East Wing. We need not see each other except at meals. We can manage a week of civility, surely." "Civility?" Lucian laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Yes, Miss Evergreen, let's manage civility." Part 4. The Slow Burn. The first 3 days were torture. Lucian moved through Hawthorne Hall like a caged predator, his presence a constant crackling tension. He spoke to Clara only when necessary, his words clipped and cold. She responded with quiet dignity, refusing to be baited by his hostility. But on the 4th day, something shifted. Clara had taken it upon herself to organize the library. Truly organize it, not merely arrange books but restore order to chaos. She'd cataloged volumes, repaired damaged spines, created a system that would have made any scholar weep with joy. Lucian found her perched on a ladder, carefully cleaning gilt lettering from a first edition of Paradise Lost. "You're destroying my uncle's collection," he said flatly. "I'm preserving it." Clara didn't look down. "These books were drowning in neglect. They deserve better." "They're not your concern." "Neither are you, and yet here I am." She descended the ladder with careful grace, turning to face him. "Your uncle loves these books. He loves this library. I'm doing this for him, not for you. If you wish to stop me, you'll have to physically remove me, and I suspect even you're not quite that barbaric." Lucian stared at her, truly stared, as though seeing her for the first time. In the afternoon light filtering through the tall windows, Clara was luminous. Her dark hair had escaped its pins, tumbling down her back in waves. Her cheeks were flushed from exertion, and her eyes blazed with a fierce intelligence that made his breath catch. "Why do you care?" he asked quietly. "About the books, about my uncle, about any of this?" Clara set down her cloth carefully. "Because kindness is the only currency that matters, my lord. Your uncle showed it to me when I had nothing. I'm simply returning it." Something in Lucian's chest cracked open, just slightly, just enough to let in a sliver of light. "Help me," he said abruptly. "With the library. I'll help you." The next 3 days transformed into something neither of them had anticipated. They worked side by side, their hands occasionally brushing as they shelved books, their conversations deepening with each passing hour. Lucian told her about his father's failures, about the weight of inherited debt, about the moment Victoria had chosen wealth over him and how that rejection had poisoned everything he touched. Clara spoke of her mother's death, of her father's shame, of the quiet courage required to smile at customers while your world crumbled. She told him about the dreams she'd abandoned, university, travel, love, and how she'd made peace with a life of service. "You shouldn't have had to," Lucian said fiercely one evening as they worked by candlelight. "You're brilliant, Clara. You should be running a publishing house, not shelving books in a village shop." "Perhaps," she smiled sadly. "But I'm alive, and I'm not hungry, and I have books. That's more than many women can claim." "It's not enough." "It's what I have." At dinner on the 6th day, Lucian reached across the table and took her hand. The touch was electric, sending shivers through Clara's entire body. "I've been unfair to you," he said quietly. "You came here with grace and dignity, and I repaid you with cruelty. I'm sorry, Clara, truly." She couldn't speak. Her throat had closed around the words she desperately wanted to say. Words about how she'd begun to see the man beneath the bitterness, how his rare smiles had become the highlight of her days, how she'd started to hope for something she'd sworn never to want. "Tomorrow," Lucian continued, "my uncle will ask if we've found connection. I suspect he'll ask us separately, hoping we'll confess to feelings we don't possess. We should decide now what we'll tell him." The moment shattered. Clara withdrew her hand, her heart sinking. Of course, this was all still a transaction, a negotiation. She'd been foolish to imagine otherwise. "Tell him the truth," she said, "that we've come to respect each other, that we've found common ground, but that love requires more than a week." Lucian's expression darkened. "And if I told him something different?" "Then you'd be lying to a dying man for the sake of an inheritance." "Would I?" His eyes searched hers. "Or would I be telling him the truth?" Before Clara could respond, the servant entered to clear the plates, and the moment dissolved like morning mist. Part 5. The Fire. The fire began at midnight. Clara woke to the smell of smoke and the sound of servants shouting. She grabbed her dressing gown and rushed into the corridor, where chaos reigned. Flames consumed the east wing, the oldest part of the hall, where Lord Reginald's most precious documents were stored. The ledgers, the proof of the family's honor, the records that would allow Lucian to rebuild. Everything was burning. Without conscious thought, Clara ran toward the flames. "Miss Evergreen, no!" A footman grabbed her arm, but she wrenched free. The heat was suffocating, the smoke so thick she could barely see. But she'd memorized the layout of the library during her days of organization. She knew exactly where the ledgers were kept. Her lungs screamed as she plunged into the inferno. Flames licked at her nightgown, and she beat them out with her bare hands, not feeling the pain. She reached the cabinet, yanked open the drawer, and began shoving documents into her arms. The ceiling groaned. A beam cracked above her head. She ran. Lucian was fighting the fire with the servants when he saw her emerge from the smoke like an avenging angel, or a demon, her nightgown singed black, her hair wild, her arms laden with papers. His heart stopped. Then it exploded back to life with a force that nearly brought him to his knees. "Clara!" He rushed toward her, catching her as her legs buckled. "God, Clara, what were you thinking? You could have died!" She coughed, her entire body trembling. "The ledgers, your family's records, they're safe."